Well, it's been a minute since I actually recorded a vlog, but I want to take some time to do another one again. This time I want to talk about the so-called beast power. I've heard so many different interpretations, and to me it seemed like when people try to read the book of Revelation, they try to read it as though uh, they try to take it literally, as though it's speaking of things that are in a sense like literal and not symbolic. So I want to take some time to really kind of discuss something that was on my mind. I was watching a video, a YouTube video the other day of a real well-known archaeologist by the name of Ron Wyatt. And I've just kind of been looking at a lot of his research on what he's done as far as finding certain relics. Like he found the ancient remains of Noah's Ark, the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Red Sea crossing of the children of Israel when they escaped out of the land of Egypt. And he claims to have found the Ark of the Covenant. And I was watching this video, and I've seen it several times, and to me, I don't know Ron Wyatt. I never met the man, but when I watch his videos, there's nothing that would compel me to believe that the things that he has found aren't true. To me, it seems like everything that he's found, he gives a lot of good physical evidence to prove it. And I don't have any reason to doubt that, these things are true. And he backs it up with tests, scientific tests to prove. For example, he found the brimstone when he was doing an excavation of the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they did some sample analysis on one of the pieces of sulfur that he found, and that particular sulfur, you can't find it anywhere on the earth. And so he believes that's a heavenly marker that God left to prove that actually did happen, that God actually rained fire and brimstone on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so I believe that to be true. If you can back it up with scientific evidence and prove that this particular piece of artifact that you found is actually real, I don't see any reason why to dispute it. But anyway, he found the Ark of the Covenant, which is basically a golden box, but the box was overlaid with gold. I mean, the box is made out of it's called shittim wood, and it was overlaid with gold. And this is a box that God commanded Moses to make to lay up the 10 Commandments that God had written on stone. And so this is like a kind of like a something to preserve, like you would a jewelry in a case. You don't just leave a gold necklace or a gold ring. When you go to the jewelry store, they have it inside of a case so that you can look at it and everything is well kept. So that's kind of what the Ark of the Covenant was to the 10 Commandments. That it was more or less like something to help preserve it. But there was a mercy seat, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. This is where God abide, or this is where God rested in a sense. So there was a physical manifestation of God in the form of a cloud, and that was called the Shekinah glory back in the Old Testament. So the one thing I found interesting about this particular video of Ron Wyatt is that he talks about the whole experience of having to find this particular relic. But out of everything that he discovered, he doesn't show the Ark of the Covenant. He says he found it, but he doesn't show it. So that kind of leads, some of us viewers kind of, scratching our heads like, okay, well, why isn't he showing it? And so his reason behind it was that he said that there were 4 angels. He was in this particular chamber that was underground in a cave called Jeremiah's Grotto. And when he was finally able to get to the Ark of the Covenant, he was able to get in this chamber. And in this chamber, I think after he had kind of cleared everything out and had kind of arranged everything, he said there were 4 angels that looked like men that told him to turn on the camera and record the instructions that they were going to give him. And the instructions that they had given him was that the video that shows the Ark of the Covenant would not be released until the beast law power, the beast law, is enforced or enacted, as it speaks of in Revelation chapter 13. I forget what verse, but it talks about that people won't be able to buy and sell if they don't have the mark of the beast. And so I believe that's what Ron White is referring to as the beast law. And so just kind of watching this video, it just kind of just struck me like that seemed a little strange. Like, I don't doubt that he found the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, he's an archaeologist, he's a scientist, and this is what he does. This is his job. He found Mount Sinai. He found other ancient relics and other ancient burial sites, or not burial sites, but just well-known landmarks of the Bible. But this here kind of just like I was just like confused. Like, he says he found the Ark of the Covenant and he won't show it because the angels told him not to release the video footage that they told him to record while he was in that chamber until the beast law passes. Now, I'm no expert on the book of Revelation. There's many things that I've read in the book of Revelation that are still confusing to my mind. And to me, the book of Revelation, if you were to ask me my interpretation, and this could be right or could be wrong, I really think the book of Revelation is really a synopsis of man's existence on earth. To me, when Adam and Eve ate the fruit and they sinned against God, in that moment, it was like they opened a whole nother portal to a whole nother realm of the world that was shut off. And so that portal to another world that they opened, to me, is known as hell or Tartarus. And Tartarus is known to be a holding cell for the wicked. And so that place is here on earth. Earth is Tartarus. Jesus encountered a man who was possessed with an evil spirit. And when that evil spirit saw Jesus, it says, "We know who you are, thou Holy One of God. Hast thou come to torment us before the time?" Now, I don't know exactly what scripture that is, but, clearly there were evil spirits during the time of Jesus, because he was casting out all kind of demons. And during that time, I think people had not ever even known that there was demonic, influences and possessions. They may have known that there were people who were just, like insane, like the guy at the tombs, or the 2 men at the tombs that were like demon possessed, but they probably didn't know like what demon possession was. Jesus was like the first one who was an exorcist and who was casting out evil spirits out of people. And in certain occasions, these evil spirits recognized who Jesus was. And when this particular or these particular demons saw Jesus, they said, "We know who you are, thou Holy One of God. Have you come to torment us before the time?" So it's almost like they said, look, we know that our final destination and punishment is coming. But are you here to to already cast us into the fiery lake of hell, now, before our time, that's what it seemed like they're saying. So in other words, they're here, they're in the holding cell. This is the prison, earth itself. And then when God finally judges the earth, it's going to be, a separation of the good sheep and the goats, as Jesus describes in Matthew 25th chapter. And those goats are going to go into eternal fire, or the lake of fire, I believe, as John describes in the book of Revelation later, in later chapters. And so these demons are still here on earth. They're still in this holding cell, if you will. It's like it's a prison. They can move around, but they have an execution date coming. And when that day comes, then God will destroy them along with all of the people who rejected God and his son into the lake of fire. And so I believe when Adam and Eve ate the fruit, that's what caused them to be expelled out of the Garden of Eden, is that they sinned, and no sin can stand in God's presence, so they had to leave. And when they exited the Garden of Eden, which was paradise, the presence of God, they entered into what would be known as hell. Now, there are different phases of hell, I believe. Hell on earth is known as Tartarus, and then there's a hell as in the afterlife. And we find that in the parable, or not the parable, but the story that Jesus described in Luke chapter 16, is that when the rich man died and when Lazarus died, they ended up in two different places. All of it was hell, but Lazarus was comforted in Abraham's bosom, and the rich man was being tormented in flames, which I believe is also the lake of fire. So, that is also known as hell too. So sometimes people get the word hell and they kind of misunderstand that it has multiple meanings to it. It all just don't mean one thing. So, I believe when Adam and Eve sinned against God, they opened that portal. They were expelled from the Garden of Eden. They entered into Tartarus, a holding cell for the wicked. And every child that they had after that was also born into Tartarus, or into hell. And that's what we know as the earth today. And I believe the book of Revelation is giving a synopsis as to what is going to happen from the time that man sinned in the garden until God judges the whole earth and destroys it completely. So, there's going to be a rise and fall of power, and there's going to be a lot of death, a lot of mayhem, a lot of just terrible things as a result of sin. And so throughout history, we've seen, many, many things happen since God has placed man on earth. Everything from natural disasters, the flood of Noah, the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, the overthrow of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea, many, many plagues, many, many wars. famines, pestilence, disease. All of these things have been happening ever since the fall of man in the garden. And so I think that's really what John is describing in the book of Revelations, is that you see over thousands and thousands of years the same thing going on, is that certain powers come to rise and then they fall, and then they rise up and then they fall. And that's almost like saying that, it's like a plant. Let's take a tree. You can cut off a branch, and then that branch is going to regrow again. And then you got the next year or the next 2 years, you may have to cut that branch off again. Then it's going to regrow again. And so I think that's what the book of Revelation is describing, is that when it talks about this beast, having the face of a lion and claws like a bear. And I can't, I'm trying to paraphrase right now. I don't have the passage in front of me. But anyway, I think in the 13th chapter of Revelation, John talks about this beast, and it was wounded. Then there was another beast that came into power, and it gave power to the first beast. And I think what that is saying is that it's just like in ancient Egypt, when the children of Israel were coming out, and God overthrew the whole Egyptian army in the Red Sea. We can say that the head of the dragon was wounded, because Egypt at that time was the greatest power on earth. And then when God overthrew the whole Egyptian army in the Red Sea, there was no more, that they weren't as powerful as they were, because that's what really gave them their power. It was their military might and strength. And so after that, it takes a little while before you find another world empire. But you see these empires rising up, ancient Assyria and ancient Rome and many, many other empires that rose up. And so you see, like, the empires, at one point they're at their height. They're in dominance over the world, and then they fall. You find that with ancient Greece. It was a very prominent empire at one time, and then it fell. And then you find another empire rising up, and then it falls. And I think that's what the book of Daniel describes as well, too. And so you see all these different powers rising and falling, rising and falling. So it's just like that branch, it's being cut off when it grows, to a certain length, and then after a while, when it's cut off, the little stub that's left will end up regrowing again over a period of time. And so I think that's what John is saying, is that the beast power is basically just that. It's going to be wounded. It's going to be cut down, but it's going to regrow again. And over so many different years, so many different millennia, you're going to see all of these different rises and falls of power. And that's, in a sense, the power of Satan, because many of these pagan nations don't even recognize, the God of heaven and earth. So you can say, in a sense, that some of these nations, these pagan nations that came to rise and had great empires, was in one sense the power of Satan, because they had their own national God that they worshiped, and they did not worship the God of the Bible. So I think that's what John is describing. And Ron Wyatt, to me, he kind of confuses me when he says he's not going to release this video footage of him finding the Ark of the Covenant until the Beast Law passes. And I'm thinking, the Beast Law? What is that? I don't know. But I think in his mind, and I can't speak for Ron, but all I can do is assume what he might be thinking, because he's no longer living right now. But I think in his mind, when he says the Beast Law, is that he believes that there's going to be a time in the future where there's going to be a law passed by the government that you can't buy or sell unless you have this mark in your hand or in your forehead. Now, I don't see the book of Revelation saying that. I don't see John really saying that. I think what John is saying is that the mark of the beast is not necessarily a literal mark. The mark of the beast is actually a mark put on people based off of their actions and their thoughts. So it's a spiritual mark, because John also talks about that there is 144,000 who have the name of God in their foreheads. But I think if you were to take that literally, then you would have to question, did Jesus have, like a tattoo or some sort of, I don't know, some sort of brand in his head, and did the apostles have it? Did the prophets of God in the Old Testament, did they have a brand in their head? Did they have a tattoo in their head that had God's name? I don't think so. I think what John is saying is that their actions and their thoughts identified them as being the children of God. And I think John is also saying that about the children of Satan, is that their actions and their thoughts identify them as being, the children of Satan. And so it's not a literal mark. It's just, you can identify who they are by what they do and how they think. Just like you can identify the children of God by what they do and what they think. And so that is the mark. That is a spiritual mark. And that perhaps the angels and the demons can see, this particular mark on people in the spirit realm that we can't see with the physical natural eye. So in one sense, I think John is saying, look, those of you who identify with being the sons of God and the children of God, you're going to have a hard time buying and selling when great tribulation comes. And I've heard people use this word, the great tribulation, but I've tried to look that up in the book of Revelation, and I don't see the definite article "the" in front of tribulation. What I hear John talks about, he said, these are they which came out of great tribulation. That's it, just great tribulation. And he was talking about those who had washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb, basically the children of God. So I don't think there's a definite the great tribulation like people are led to believe. There's tribulation, of course. And what does that mean? That's basically a trial period, a testing period. We find that in ancient times when Joseph was sold to the Ishmaelites by his brothers who betrayed him, and then the Ishmaelites sold him to the Egyptians. Well, there was a lot of famine. Pharaoh had this dream, and he said that there were 7 fat kine and 7 lean kine. I guess the kine he was talking about may have been like maybe cows or some sort of cattle. And there was nobody there to interpret the dream. But then I believe it was either the butler that had told Pharaoh that there was a man who could interpret dreams, and his name was Joseph. And that's when Joseph was presented to Pharaoh, and he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream for him. And as a result, the very thing that Pharaoh dreamed about happened, that there were 7 years of famine and seven years of prosperity and wealth. And what Joseph did was, he knew that the years of famine were going to come. And so he went on ahead and he developed this system in which people were able to buy and sell grain because he stored so much of it. And those 7 fat years, helped to preserve the ancient world through the 7 lean years. And so when John says, they won't be able to buy or sell, I'm not sure if he's saying, unless you got this mark, you can't buy food, you can't buy water, you can't buy anything. because you are a child of God and you don't take this mark. I don't think that's really what he's saying. I think what the Apostle John is saying is that there's going to come tribulation, just like it was during the time of Joseph. And Joseph was, to me, known to be a son of God. And when he was in prison, yeah, he couldn't sell like he would if he was a free man. And that was great tribulation for him because he was falsely accused of things that he was not guilty of. He was falsely accused of pursuing Potiphar's wife and cast into prison. And so that was tribulation for him. And then eventually, when he got let out, he was promoted as governor over the land of Egypt. But then there was another tribulation period in which there were 7 lean years and there was a lot of famine. And that affected Joseph's father, Jacob, and his brothers. That's why they came to Egypt, because they were trying to buy grain. So, the famine brought about tribulation for the whole ancient world. And had it not been for Joseph being a wise man and being able to preserve a lot of grain during the 7 fat years, or the 7 years where there was a lot of prosperity, the whole ancient world would have suffered. And it did suffer during the time that there was a famine. But all I'm saying is that famine was tribulation for the whole world. It just so happened that Joseph, being the son of God, who I believe did not have the mark of Satan, he was able to sell. He sold a lot of grain. But if you look at that scripture real closely, and I believe it's Revelation 13 and 18, I might be wrong, but I think it's like the last verse, and it says something like the mark of the beast is 666. But just before that, it says that I believe those who don't have the mark might not buy or sell. Key word, might not buy. It didn't say that they couldn't buy. Might not doesn't mean that it's an indefinite, like they will not. No, it says might not buy or sell. So there's a big difference. When it says might not, that means that there's still a possibility that those who do not have the mark of Satan can buy and sell. But it's just that the beast power is going to be so great that they might not be able to buy and sell. And I would say this, had the butler not told Pharaoh about Joseph, he wouldn't be able to sell all the grain that he stored up during the 7 years that they were prosperous, because he would have been in prison. And then that famine would have came against Egypt, and they probably would have suffered a whole lot more than what they did. So that would be true of what John wrote, is that they might not. And so Joseph was one of those ones that did sell. And he was very, very prosperous in selling during the time of great tribulation. And so that's just one example. I could give more, but that's not really the point I'm trying to make right now. All I'm trying to say is that Ron Wyatt believes that there is going to be a beast law that passes. And I don't think John is ever saying that there's going to be some sort of law issued by the government where people can't buy and sell. And then you have to ask the question, in what country? Because we living in the 21st century now. And there are many countries, ancient times, you had quite a few countries, but not as many as we have now. So, when you say when he says this beast law has to pass, what are we talking about? Are we talking about, the Western hemisphere of the world, the Eastern hemisphere of the world, the Southern hemisphere of the world, the Northern hemisphere of the world? What country in particular? We talking about Europe? Are we talking about Asia? We talking about Africa? I mean, there are so many different countries that have their own currency system, their own way of how they monetize, currency. Is this going to be a beast law that passes for all these countries on all the earth? How are they going to do it? Because here in the U.S., the American dollar is apparently one of the strongest currencies in the world, if not the strongest. And so how do you pass a law saying that you can't buy or sell if you don't have this mark, when everybody's currency is different? The American dollar is a little bit stronger in other countries than it is in 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 countries that aren't as prosperous and wealthy. Like when I went to Fiji, it was a third world country. The American dollar was twice as much as the dollar there. But then you go to other countries, American currency isn't like twice as much. So I don't know. It just kind of confused me because I don't think John ever says anything about a beast law passing. And so to me, it's like, okay, he says he found the Ark of the Covenant, and he says he can't show it until the beast law passes. But what is this law he's talking about? Because John doesn't talk about there being a law that passes. And I just think that so many people are sometimes led to believe in the view that Ron Wyatt holds about the book of Revelation. I believe the view that he holds is called the futurist view. And that is that in the future, there's going to be some sort of revolution in the world government, and that this revolution in the world government is going to cause everybody to have to get a mark either in their hand or in their forehead. And unless you have this mark, you can't buy or sell. I don't believe that view to be true. As I described before, I believe the mark of the beast that John was talking about is spiritual, not physical. And that it seems as though that Ron Wyatt, when he talks about this mark of the beast, is that he's taking it literally. As people are literally going to have a physical mark that you can see with your naked eye on their hand or in their forehead. And I don't think that's the case. I just don't see that happening. So it causes me to kind of doubt, to a certain extent, what Ron Wyatt is saying about him finding the Ark of the Covenant. I believe he may very well have found it, but will there actually be a beast law that passes? I don't know. It doesn't say anything about a beast law. And what is the beast law? It's kind of confusing in that sense if you look at it from his perspective. And all I'm saying is I would really love to see this videotape of these four men, which he says are angels, that told him to record this footage and to show the actual Ark of the Covenant. I would love to see it. Not saying that he didn't find it, not saying any of the things he says is not true, but I'm just saying that when I read the book of Revelation, I just don't see what he's talking about from his perspective. So I don't know. I just thought I might record this to kind of clear some things up, because right now, the world crisis with COVID-19, there's so many different theories about this being the end times, and that when we come out with a vaccine, some people believe that the government is going to require you to take the vaccine. And if you don't take the vaccine, you can't buy or sell. They want everybody to be vaccinated, and that's going to, in a sense, be the mark of the beast. So there's all this kind of like talk about the end times right now. It's real popular, and I'm not sure if all what people are saying about it is actually true. I know that when Jesus talked about the end time, like the end of the world, he said, no man knows the day nor the hour, not even the Son of Man, but only the Father which is in heaven. So I take him at his word. Don't none of us know when it's going to happen. We don't know when God is going to destroy the world. He said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the last day. That they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. And then the flood came and took them all away. So people are going to be living their lives normally. It seemed like, according to what Jesus is saying, that they're not going to have any clue about what's getting ready to happen. And then suddenly there's going to be, great destruction upon the earth. How that's going to happen, I don't know. I do have a theory, though, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but I do believe that perhaps that God might bring about the culmination of the end of the world because of man's rebellion in wanting to leave the earth. Now, I'm getting ready to talk about something that I never share with anybody, but it's just my thought, and it could be right or could be wrong, but it seems to me that when God made man, he gave him dominion over the earth. I've heard now that we have been trying to explore other planets such as Mars, which is a 26-month voyage from the earth. So a little over 2 years to get there. To my mind, it seemed a little strange that humans are now trying to explore space and trying to find another planet to inhabit. To me, that would be symbolic to what human beings did in ancient times when they built the Tower of Babel, is that they were trying to defy God. They were trying to build this tower as a safety, a place of refuge in case there might be another great flood to destroy the whole earth. They were basically saying, look, we're going to build this tower. It's going to reach so high. We're going to be able to just all evacuate and get inside this tower so that if God should destroy the whole earth with a watery flood like he did during the time of Noah, we'll escape it. We'll just have this tower, and this tower will preserve our lives. And that's when God confounded the languages. And so I believe the same to be true here is that God gave man dominion on the planet Earth. God did not allow man dominion over any other planet. And I think that's how come we don't see life on other planets. They're there. We know that they're there. And it's not that God never gave us permission to explore space, but I don't think he gave us permission to live on another planet. And I think doing that is, in a sense, defying God, because it's like this universe belonged to him. And if we think it's okay to just go from planet Earth to planet Mars whenever we want to, it's almost like we saying we don't care who that planet belonged to. We just want to go there. We're not going to ask and get permission. We just going to go. So I believe that if man should come up with devices witty enough, and I believe we got some pretty witty inventions as far with these space aircrafts, to leave planet Earth and to go to Mars and to inhabit Mars, I think that's going to be something that might bring about the culmination of the end of the earth, because that'll be like man defying God. So we can do what we want to do. We don't need your permission to leave planet Earth. And as I said before, I believe the earth is Tartarus. It's a holding cell. Since Adam and Eve sinned, we are in prison. And everybody has an execution date because we all now are subject to die. We live for a period of time on this planet and then we die. And so our lives are forever before the Lord. And in his court, he looks at what we do from the time we are born until the time we die, and he judges. And if we are acquitted of our sins, when God judges, then he may allow us to enter back into eternal life, which is the garden of God. So to try to leave the planet, to me, that would be contrary to what God intended man to do. He intended for man to be a steward over the earth, not over Mars or any other planet. And if we try to do that, then what does that say about the evil spirits that abide here too on earth? Is that God would have to, if he's going to destroy the earth, but we have human beings living on Mars, then God would have to, in a sense, I don't know if he'd have to destroy all of Mars, but maybe the people on Mars, he would have to basically cause destruction on 2 different planets. And I don't see the Bible saying anything about that. So to my mind, in order for God to stop man from going to another planet, he may have to destroy the earth before that could even happen. And so I think that could possibly bring about the culmination of the end of the world, is that we're trying to leave planet Earth. So what is that all going to look like? Will it happen all in my lifetime? I don't know. I heard that we might be ready to leave planet Earth to explore Mars maybe by the year 2070. But perhaps it might happen a lot sooner than that. I don't know. But I'm just giving you my theory, my interpretation. Take it for what it is, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. But it seems to me that that's probably what's going to bring about the end of the world. I don't know for sure, but we'll see. But I just kind of want to clarify what the beast power is and what the mark of the beast is, and that, I would love to see this video that Ron Wyatt has. I just don't know if I ever will, because I don't know if there's ever going to be a time where the government is going to make this decree that everybody has to take a mark in order to buy and sell. I just don't see that happening. And so it's like, okay, if that doesn't happen, how will we ever know that Ron Wyatt truly found, the Ark of the Covenant and, everything else that he says, about the 4 men, that they were angels, and, seeing is believing. And if he got video footage, it's like, well, if you're misinterpreting what John wrote and that there's really not going to be a beast law that passes, then maybe it might be best to go ahead and release this footage, because there ain't going to be a beast law that pass, because the mark of the beast has already been here. There's been men who have corrupted themselves upon the earth from the beginning, from Adam and Eve to Cain and Abel. Abel was a murderer. To my mind, he had the mark of Satan in his forehead. Not literally, but spiritually, because of his thoughts. He thought to do harm to his brother who was innocent, and he killed him and slew him. And God had already told Cain, if you do well, your offering will be accepted. But if you do not well, then sin lieth at the door, and your desire shall be unto him. And what is he talking about? He's talking about Satan. He's saying your desire is going to be unto Satan, to do evil. So Satan is going to have control of your heart and your mind. And to me, that's the mark of the beast, is that when man has ill will and evil imagination, is that they become, in a sense, Satan's children, his henchmen, his army, if you will. And that's what Cain was. And so, was there a beast law to pass in order for Cain to be a child of Satan? No. Was there a physical mark put on his body, as far as his hand and his forehead? There was a mark put on Cain so that nobody would slay him, and God put that mark on him. But it wasn't like a mark, I believe, like what John is talking about Revelation, a mark on the hand, a mark on the forehead. This is a mark of, hey, hands off, don't kill this man, more or less. That's what it seems like what God had done. Like, he's a marked man, but he's not to be killed by anyone else. His time is going to come and God is going to judge him. And I think that's what the mark that God put on Cain was really all about, is that, he has an execution date. It's coming. Don't worry about it. And I think God just didn't want people to kill each other. God didn't want people to just be murdering one another, even though Cain murdered his brother Abel. I think God really wanted man to leave any kind of capital punishment up to him during that time. Eventually, as time began to go forward and man began to grow on the earth and multiply, that God did allow the execution of certain men at the hand of man, but at the counsel of God. And we find that all throughout the Old Testament. There were many commands God gave in which the sentence was capital punishment. So at the first, they didn't have the law during the time of Cain and Abel. And so I believe, the mark that God put on Cain after he had slew his brother Abel was more or less a mark of, execution, that Abel is going to get judged for the time, for the things that he have done by God. And so now, we still have men who think like Abel, act like Abel, and we have men that think like Cain and act like Cain. We have two different type of men, and what they do and how they think identifies them as to who they are and what group they belong to. And I think that's what John is talking about as far as the mark of the beast, is that there are two groups that are being identified. You have the sheep that identify with Abel, and you have the goats that identify with Cain. And as Jesus described in Matthew chapter 25, at the end of the chapter, he talks about where the goats are going to go and where the sheep are going to go. And I think that's what the book of Revelation is really talking about, is that everything that happened from the time that Adam and Eve ate the fruit, all of these wars and pestilences and natural disasters, all of these things happen on the earth. In the end, God is going to separate the sheep from the goat. And the sheep are going to go into eternal life, and the goats are going to go into eternal damnation. And so, to me, that's what Revelation is. It's a synopsis of everything that's going to happen on earth, and that it's a courtroom. You have the sheep are the defendants, and the plaintiffs are the goats. The plaintiff is falsely accusing the sheep of all these crimes, but the sheep have been vindicated and justified by the Father and the Judge of Judges, Jesus Christ himself. And he comes in and he gives his verdict, and he gives his defense against the goat, and he condemns the goats, and he banishes them to eternal damnation. And so that's what I believe Revelation is. I mean, there were many, many different images and mysteries about it that I can't necessarily discuss because I don't have full understanding about all of it. But I believe the general synopsis of it is just that, is that when Adam and Eve ate that fruit, they opened up a whole nother can of worms, if you will, which would lead to the culmination of the end of the world. That at that time when they ate it, they didn't even know anything about, what God had planned, and that the world would be populated with so many children of theirs, so many descendants of theirs, and thousands of years off from the time that they had eaten it. They had no clue, the destruction that they had brought about the whole earth by just simply eating that fruit. So, yeah, just kind of want to, give my spiel on that. So hope you enjoyed it.